Now let us begin the third session of the 14th Seoul ODA International Conference. Session 3 will discuss creating more inclusive digital future. Please upload your questions using online question and answer system, SimFlow. Mr. Ko Gi-young, Head of Asian and Pacific Training Center for Information and Communication Technology for Development of UN SCOP, will take the role as a moderator. Mr. Go, please proceed with the session from now on.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you very much. Again, a warm welcome to our session number 3, titled Creating a More Inclusive Digital Future. My name is Ki-young Ko, as introduced, Director of UN APC ICT Asia Pacific Training Center for ICT for Development. We are a specialized ICT capacity building institution under UN, Asia, and the Pacific. Our mandate is to build human and institutional ICT capacity for our member states. I'm very happy and delighted to moderate this session, number 3, which is very closely related to our work as well. In this session, we'll have 3 eminent speakers around the globe, and we'll listen to these 3 speakers for 15 minutes each, followed by 30 minutes discussion among the speakers, and 10 minutes for Q&A session from the audience. To warm ourselves up, I'd like to take a moment to think about today's topic, creating a more inclusive digital future. What is the digital future for us? There will be no digital future we want without proper digitization of the data and information, and digitalization with new business model, plus the cultural change, namely digital transformation. And why we talk about inclusiveness of this digital transformation? Because there are gaps among countries, people, age, gender, what have you. So in order to alleviate this we call it digital divide. In order to alleviate this digital divide, we need to be inclusive. And maybe inclusive is not enough. And that's why we're talking about more inclusiveness. And you probably have guessed already, that's because of pandemic. Pandemic has changed almost every facet of our daily lives, for better or worse. But in a sense, this pandemic has accelerated digital transformation. But at the same time, it widened the digital divide, the gap. So we need more inclusive digital transformation to make it equitable and make it right. And we will look at this issue through ODA lens, because ODA, if it is used properly for the right place at the right time, I believe it's going to be the most effective way to fix this problem in a fast manner. Having said this, to facilitate our discussion today, we came up with the following 3 important questions for discussion purpose. The first question before us is number 1, how digital transformation can be leveraged as a stepping stone for developing countries to promote sustainable social economic development. Number 2, how developing countries can diversify and utilize global partnerships in advancing digital transformation. Number 3, what are the strategies of development cooperation to resolve the digital divide and polarization in developing countries that may be aggravated by digital transformation. Before I introduce our 3 eminent speakers before us, I'd like to announce a short housekeeping announcement. For audience, when you put your questions, to the system, please brief and to the point. And for the speakers, be mindful of time, please. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you our three eminent speakers. Our first speaker is Ms. Doreen Bongdon Martin, who was elected Director of ITU, Telecommunication Development Bureau, in November 2018. And she's the first woman in ITU history to hold one of the top elected management positions. She's a strategic leader with more than 30 years high-level experience in international and intergovernmental relations, and have a long history of success in policy and strategy development. Our next speaker is sitting right next to me, Dr. Chi-Young Song, who is the Vice President of Science and Technology Policy Institute, STEPI, after serving as Chief Director of Division for Global Innovation Strategy. As the Chief Director, Dr. Song has managed both multilateral and development cooperation projects. Now, Dr. Song oversees the entire research projects in STEPI. Our last, but not the least, definitely, speaker is Mr. Christopher Burns, who is a director for technology innovation in Technology and Research Hub at USAID. He leads the technical teams focused on digital finance, digital inclusion, cybersecurity, and emerging technologies. In his 12 years with USAID, he has spearheaded and served as the technical lead for a number of public-private partnerships, including the Digital Impact Alliance, the GSMA Connected Women Program, and Alliance for Affordable Internet. So now I'd like to invite Doreen to the floor for your presentation. Doreen, you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, clear, loud and clear. Floor is yours.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Good afternoon from Geneva, Switzerland. It's such a pleasure to join you for this important conference around the theme of building back better through knowledge exchanges and, of course, through ICTs. I've been invited today to speak on digital transformation and how it can help developing countries in particular to promote sustainable social and economic development. I think that a burning question for so many governments around the world right now, as the virus continues to inflict social and economic disruption on a scale far beyond anything that we've ever faced, it's really about, how can we leverage that connectivity? The past 18 months have been a watershed in the way that we look at connectivity. And of course, in ultra-connected nations like Korea, where fast, affordable broadband to the home is the norm, the internet has quite literally become a lifeline. It's enabled people to continue working, children to continue their schooling, and of course, government agencies to keep the population updated on vital health information, and of course, much more. But regrettably, the majority of the world is not so lucky. An estimated 3.7 billion people have never, ever been online. And for far too many more, connecting to the internet remains too expensive, too slow, or simply too hard to play any meaningful role in improving their lives. And I think for me and for us at the ITU, this vast connectivity chasm is really an ongoing, I would say, tragedy. Just think of the powerful transformational effect digital access could have in terms of breaking down so many chronic development barriers and to dramatically improving the lives of ordinary people and the future prospects for their children. The pandemic has had the effect of significantly accelerating the digitization of services as companies seek to harness digital solutions to build future resilience and, of course, to assure ongoing business continuity. But on a practical level, that means that the gaping divide between digital haves and digital have-nots will get even wider. And of course, that's amplifying its impact on quality of life and equality of opportunity for the billions who remain offline or poorly connected. COVID has not proved the short-lived health crisis that we had hoped this time last year. Instead, it has emerged as this powerful game changer, not just for the digital sector, but also for the whole of society. And I think there's no doubt at all that digital will be at the core of every nation's social and economic recovery. And for developing countries all around the world, that needs to serve as a clarion call that rapidly mobilizes resources around ambitious new national digital development plans. Let us be clear, connecting the second half of humanity represents a formidable challenge. The scale of investment is daunting. Our Connecting Humanity report estimates that the cost of connecting everyone by 2030 will be something in the vicinity of 428 billion, and that's just on the infrastructure piece. At the same time, geographical hurdles like mountainous terrain or extreme climate conditions stretch the physical capacities of network infrastructure. Remote, sparsely populated areas inhabited by low-income communities are expensive to connect. It may never deliver acceptable return on investment. And lack of local expertise on the ground also is a big issue for many operators that are trying to manage and also maintain today's sophisticated digital equipment. It could be easy to be discouraged when you think about those many challenges, but COVID has confirmed that internet connectivity is no longer something desirable. It's a must. Broadband networks are vital for human development and economic prosperity as other foundational networks like transport or energy. I think it's clear that the scale of the challenge before us means that no player, be it government or private sector, is going to be able to do this alone. These global challenges need global solutions. So let me highlight for you 3 interlocking areas. These are 3 areas that I believe will be key in terms of making real and rapid progress in redrawing the global connectivity map. The first one is a new approach to partnership. Broad collaboration between industry, governments, banks, development financing institutions, and international organizations is absolutely essential. We need new models that share the burden and that offer greater incentives and better guarantees of return on investment. In today's networked economies, telcos and operators are far from the main beneficiaries of improved connectivity. The fact needs to be reflected in more cooperative arrangements that recognize all parties as fully fledged development partners rather than just as commercial suppliers. And that collaborative model also needs to extend into the heart of government itself. And we would call this the whole of government approach to digital development, where all departments, all agencies, and all authorities of the government are together. Past experience confirms that siloed implementations by different arms of government to solve specific problems are not just costly, they also fail to leverage the truly transformational effect of new technologies. I was just in Estonia this week with Chris, by the way, for the Tallinn Digital Summit. And it was quite incredible to see how Estonia has successfully adopted this whole of government approach and has been able to scale up shared digital services that everyone can use at a fraction of the cost. In a developing world context, I want to refer to our experience in Niger with our Smart Villages project. Working with local communities and different stakeholders, this project is bringing meaningful connectivity to rural villages where we're using technology and applications that were developed by and adapted to the local needs and the skills of the local people. This model is also being adopted in other countries, from Pakistan to Vanuatu, with lots of interest coming from the Americas region. And I think further afield, we're also, I want to mention quickly, collaborating with Estonia, Germany, the Digital Impact Alliance, to find ways to accelerate this digitization of government services in support of the 17 SDGs that you can see as my virtual background behind me. The second space that I think is absolutely fundamental and very closely related is the regulatory reform that's needed. Countries need to do all that they can to be able to create attractive conditions for investment and to ensure a level playing field for all players, one that encourages new entrants and healthy competition. Digital companies are keen to invest in markets where they can see the potential for growth and a reasonable opportunity for return on investment. And of course, where governance and regulatory frameworks are transparent, are predictable, and of course, reliable. Modernization and harmonization of older regulatory frameworks is absolutely important so that we can ensure that each type of service provider is treated equally. And I would say also, as important is the adoption of technology neutral policies to allow operators to employ newer technologies that may be better adapted to developing world contexts. Best practice frameworks should also provide intra-sectoral cooperation so that the private sector companies are encouraged to work together, sharing the overheads and also sharing, of course, the rewards too. And my third action, where I think we need some focus, is what the UN system likes to call capacity building. So getting, of course, the networks and the services out there is absolutely vital, but work to install cell phone masts, microwave links, submarine cables, satellite dishes, and to optimize national regulation needs to be complemented by concerted efforts in the space of building digital literacy, promoting locally developed content in appropriate languages. That language piece is so important. And of course, nurturing a local innovation culture that will build long-term demand and sustainability. Our research, and the research of many others as well, confirms that for many unconnected communities, this lack of awareness and skills is actually a huge barrier to the take-up of digital services. Of course, building digital education into national curricula where feasible and creating innovative programs to promote the digital education of young people and traditionally marginalized communities, from women to rural dwellers, persons with disabilities, is also going to be vital to achieving full digital inclusion. This is one area, I think, where creative partnerships could play a powerful role. For example, through governments collaborating with local digital companies to achieve digital skills training objectives. And I'm reminded, of course, of the excellent example, and I really love this example from the Republic of Korea some years back, when retired engineers from local telcos were brought in to help run digital awareness and training courses for traditionally marginalized communities like housebound women, to help to ensure that every citizen was empowered to take full advantage of the country's commitment to putting high-speed broadband within reach of all. Korea is, of course, the leading example of a country rising from a low level of broadband access to one of the highest in the world, and learning from the cases in Korea, such as the advanced e-commerce vitalization or the recent trend of virtual humanity dominating the social media and the marketing industry. Our work on capacity building in other countries can also help to clarify some of these issues when we look at technology integration across the society and the economies. At the ITU, we're working to build these kinds of multi-stakeholder partnerships. We're looking to empower local people with the digital skills that will help them to improve their lives while of course growing national economies. Our work spans from our digital transformation centers that are delivering basic digital literacy to our Equals Global Partnership, where we have 100 partners, actually more than 100 partners, working to tackle the digital gender gap. Of course, working closely aligned with the UN Secretary General's roadmap for digital cooperation. We've been proud to set up a new joint facility for digital capacity development together with UNDP, where we'll be doing a sort of digital matchmaking. We're having a hub and a clearinghouse to connect countries in need with capacity building offerings from donors. And of course, our GIGA universal school connectivity effort, and I think you had Henrietta Four in the opening. She's our big champion, where we're aiming to connect every school on the planet to the internet and every young person to information, opportunity, and choice. If the challenges associated with connecting the second half of humanity are immense, I think so too are the opportunities, and I want to stress that the opportunities are huge. And of course, the urgency is now. Next year, ITU will hold its World Telecommunications Development Conference in June. And this conference comes at a time when the whole world is focused on the vital importance of digital platforms. And this conference gives us the opportunity, a once in a generation opportunity to build a new digital future. COVID has shown us that business as usual is no longer an option. And with connectivity so critical to human progress and the efforts to reach the 17 SDGs, we cannot simply sit back and hope that market forces alone will do this. And that's why our WTDC will place a special emphasis on bringing players from right across the digital ecosystem and beyond. And through our new Partner to Connect Digital Coalition program that we're running in parallel with the conference, we're bringing together governments, business, in the investment community and civil society to make commitments, pledges on what they will do to ensure that we can close the digital divide. I do hope that many of you will join us next year at this vitally important digital development conference, so that working as one, we can at last forge our missing link, bridge the digital divide, and make our shared dream of a fully connected planet a reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doreen. Very useful presentation with a lot of recommendations and suggestions. And we very much look forward to your big conference, WTDC, next year, June. And we would like to participate in person, but let's see how it develops. And thank you very much. And I will just turn to our next speaker, Dr. Song. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Go, kindly introducing me. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Once again, this is Jung Song, Senior Research Fellow and Vice President of Science and Technology Policy Institute. I can guess that some of you may be very curious why a Science and Technology Policy guy is sitting here in this ODA conference. It is because I'm going to talk about digital technology and development cooperation. And to do so, let me first briefly touch the issue of very notorious coronavirus disease, aka COVID-19. It has changed and still is changing our society and daily life of individual people and national and also global economy. Usually it created a lot of negative impacts, but at the same time, we also noticed that some very positive one in this era of crisis. For example, untapped business, heavily utilizing the digital platform, has emerged, scaled up, and it developed very enormously. For example, in Korea, the Kakao, the neighbor, and the Pedare Minjo is the delivery application company, has emerged and has grown up as the major player in this economy. It means that the digital technology seems like a very lone light at the end of the tunnel very dark tunnel created by this very notorious COVID-19. In many cases that we notice so-called very rapidly accelerated digital transformation around the world. That's why the Korean government has announced the so-called Digital New Deal last year. It means that Korean government tried to overcome this kind of economic stagnant and also recover our economy to the normal level and also promote the further economic growth by using this digital technology. So Korean government ambitiously announced that they will expand the digital infrastructure further, and also they are going to boost development of the untapped business from now until next 5 years. And this kind of digital transformation efforts is done by many other countries. For example, in ASEAN, they announced the so-called comprehensive recovery framework, and also in this framework, ASEAN also emphasized the digital transformation. So we can notice a lot of digital transformation and digital kind of technology development efforts from the many countries. But we have to think about, at first, think about the very unique feature of digital technology. We have to invest a lot financially in order to kind of establish this kind of infrastructure. So it is not easy for developing countries to do this kind of a massive infrastructure. And also, the technology itself, its progress is so fast. And there have been a lot of quantum leaps in the process of development of digital technology. So if you're left behind in terms of technology, in terms of infrastructure, or in terms of investment, it's not easy to catch up. So we have to think about it. That's why the developing countries, they have a lot bigger and a lot severe difficulties in this stage of digital transformation. That's why we are sitting here and discuss about the digital technology and development cooperation right now. Let's look at this picture on the left-hand side. We can see more monotonous tone of colors. Means that the late 1990s, the many countries and many people, they did not depend on the digital technology. So quite fair. Everybody does not know about the technology. But the right-hand side, we can see very colorful pictures and different types of colors. The levels of colors are so different. It means that it's not fair anymore. It means that we are heavily experiencing so-called digital divide. Even worse, the burden, especially the financial burden, more goes to the developing countries. For example, Sub-Saharan Africa, according to some data, some analysis, Sub-Saharan African countries, they pay more when they are using a very well-known video conference application, Zoom. It means that less developed country pay more compared to more developed countries. I think it should be a very critical issue we have to consider together. And also, many developing countries, they are not able to collect the data. The data is very important to get a critical factor in the digital economies. If you cannot get those kind of data, or if you have to use bad data, not correct data, then maybe the digital economies can make any kind of outcomes you want to make at first. And also, the digital technologies, along with automation, may eradicate the opportunity of creating mass employment opportunity in developing countries. For example, Korea is very well industrialized country. Means that we have the massive kind of a scale of a manufacturing sector within our domestic the category. Means that we were able to provide a certain scale of job opportunity to our people. But in many developing countries, it's not easy. because they do not have that kind of a manufacturing base compared to Korea. Even before they enter into that kind of a job creating stage, the automation, digital technology can kind of take away the opportunity of that kind of the stage to the developing countries. So it will create the negative impact to the people who are living in the developing countries. Okay, thus far I talked about very negative side of the digital technologies. This comes from its very unique features. Then how to deal it? The digital divide between developing countries and developed countries and within the developing countries. Ironically, the answer lies in the digital technology itself. Because if we can cooperate with the developing countries, if we can transfer or we can support them to have better digital technology capacity, then we can overcome those kind of digital divide together. Let's look at the picture. We have two regions here. The UNESCO actually launched some kind of a project. They try to figure out how many schools are there, and also identifying the location of school. At the same time, how intensively those schools are using the internet kind of facilities. In the left-hand side, we can see very light kind of a spot. Means that successfully identify the location of the schools. At the same time, those schools are intensively using the digital technology. At the right side, we can see the relatively dark kind of picture here. It means that we cannot figure out the location of schools. At the same time, those schools are not intensively using those kind of digital infrastructure. The UNESCO create this kind of the program by using AI algorithm. Okay, let me add one more explanation. Actually, UNESCO used this kind of data when they planned their ODA project. It means that the right-hand side, they have to invest more, or they provide more assistance to this region. And they have to figure out where the schools are. And then they decided that they have to provide more funds to establish the infrastructure here in this region. It means that the digital technology was utilized in the stage of the planning the ODA project. And also, the digital technology itself was utilized and exercised at the site. For example, the malaria kit and the smart pill box and some edutainment kind of applications. And I'm not going to talk about more details here because I have very limited time. And also the German BMG and the GIG. BMG is the ministry, and the GIG is the development cooperation agency. They also the supporting common voice of Mozilla. Means that they provide some kind of the voice kind of devices who are illiterate and also who speaks minor language. So those people cannot use those kind of devices because the explanation is written in the major languages, or they cannot read the letters and they cannot speak those kind of major languages. So this kind of another example of providing support by using digital technology. As we can see thus far, the digital transformation and digital technology will reshape and is currently reshaping everything in our society: healthcare, education, the agriculture, economics, and even democracy. And also, it will change, and it also is changing the daily life of every individual. So if every individual is not that familiar with the digital technology, and their future should be very gloomy. So development cooperation by using digital technology should be effective and inclusive and fair. Okay, then how we can say it should be effective? It means that we have to have at least certain types of measurement. So why we have to talk about measurement? And OECD DAG and also COICA, they are trying to set up some kind of indicator in order to measure the effectiveness of their ODA activities and the project. So why we need measurement? In policy world, when we set up the policy, any policy, we always set up some kind of milestone and set up some kind of quantitative goals. And why? Then we can figure out that how far we have to go and where we are here at this moment. Not just evaluation, in order to draw some kind of a further suggestion, the policy suggestion. So we have to have the measurement, the quantitative. And also we have to promote public-private partnership. It is very crucial. In many cases, government is doing a good job and government agencies are very active players. But sometimes the private sector, they are more efficient and more effective because they can transfer their knowledge, their fund, and other resources at the site directly. So the private sector should participate in more actively. In terms of policy, what we have to do in the ODA, that we have to support the development of institutional setting and also the personal capacity as well as institutional capacity. And also we have to provide some support and assistance and suggestions in terms of a legal framework. And the final suggestion I have to talk about is that at this moment, I have to say that the digital technology is not a specific technology we can focus on. At this moment, digital technology is the so-called the cross-cutting technology. It means that it is connected to every field. But at the same time, we need some kind of science and technology and knowledge because the mechanical engineering, the mathematics and programming, and any other scientific and technological knowledge are very crucial in terms of the development of digital technology. So when we provide the ODA development cooperation to our developing countries, our partner countries, we also provide assistance to the science and technology capacity building. And Korea is ready to share our knowledge and our experience with our partner countries. For example, Korea has set up some kind of the act. Here is a Digital Divide Act, but actually the real name is Framework Act on Intelligent Informatization. Means that those kind of act, Korean government try to reduce the digital gap within Korean society. It means that always Korea is doing something. The Korean government set up the legal framework at first and set up the master plan and then action plan. That's kind of very unique experience Korea has done thus far during last half century. So we are ready to share our knowledge, our practice with our partner countries. So let's go further for the co-prosperity world with Korea, our experience in digital transformation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Song. Very inspiring presentation. And we're running a little short on time, so let me turn our virtual mic to Chris. Chris, you there?
Hello, Kyung. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. The floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Well, good afternoon and evening, everyone, particularly to those of you in Seoul today. I'm sending my greetings from Estonia, as Doreen pointed out, but normally I am based in the Washington, D.C. area. And thank you for the kind invitation to attend today's conference. I would like to briefly underscore a few similar points made by Doreen and Chiyoung and then build off of them for a moment. As we know, countries around the world are in the midst of an historic digital transition with the rapid development and adoption of digital technology that is transforming industries, governments, economies, and societies. We've witnessed the power of digital technology along with the internet to spur economic growth, to improve development outcomes, and to lift millions out of poverty. The global COVID-19 pandemic, of course, has not only accelerated this transition, but has also surfaced the need for governments and the private sector to double down on their efforts to digitize their services. Yet the pandemic has also exposed the magnitude of a growing digital divide between men and women, rural and urban, rich and poor, and young and old. Unreliable or non-existent and unaffordable internet connectivity, combined with a lack of digital literacy, are holding people back from accessing and maximizing these new digitized services to meet their socioeconomic needs. In today's digital age, international development and humanitarian assistance objectives can no longer be realized without a holistic and inclusive approach to achieving digital transformation, one that benefits everyone. Yet according to the World Bank, it will take over $100 billion to reach universal access to broadband connectivity by 2030. And that's just on the African continent. These investment needs are not just for digital infrastructure, but also include information and communication technology skills, content, policy and regulation costs, and network operation and maintenance. It is also not enough to simply bridge these financing gaps. We must also ensure that we are not blind to the actual health of the digital ecosystem that we are helping to create. Unfortunately, our historic digital transformation has also opened up the door to increased disinformation and misinformation, and the rise of digital authoritarianism that is undermining our shared democratic values and individual rights, both online and offline. The world's digital financing needs are staggering and will require the coordination of bilateral donors such as USAID and QUICA, development banks, private foundations, and the private sector. But as a development organization and as a community of donors and investors with what we hope is the shared goal of helping people progress beyond assistance, where do we start to make a dent in the world's digital investment needs? How do we know, for example, whether a country needs more broadband infrastructure, help with building cybersecurity within its civil society, new policies and regulation to help catalyze greater private sector investment, or all the above? To begin to try to answer that question at USAID, we launched the agency's first ever digital strategy in April 2020. In drafting the strategy, we took inspiration from the principles for digital development. These are 9 best practices for any deployment of digital technology in a development context. Principles like build with the user in mind, or be data-driven, or make sure that we are reusing and improving all the time. And the one inspiration that we particularly took around the strategy design is putting and understanding the existing ecosystem at the heart of what we are hoping to achieve. Better understanding the digital ecosystem not only helps us consider how each component of that ecosystem may impact our development and humanitarian assistance programming, it can also help identify infrastructure gaps that may require dedicated investment or opportunities to build capacity, or the need to enact catalytic policy reforms. And we believe it is a useful construct for understanding how to close the digital divide and drive greater digital inclusion across all sectors and all geographies. But what do we mean by a digital ecosystem, particularly one that is open, inclusive, and secure, as we are focused on in our digital strategy? We define a digital ecosystem as the systems, enabling environment, and stakeholders that make it possible for people and communities to use digital technologies to access services, to interact with one another, and to pursue economic opportunities. And this is a helpful definition, but once we launched the digital strategy and we rolled up our sleeves and we began implementing it, we found out that we needed an even more detailed definition. So one of our key initiatives under the strategy is the development of a digital ecosystem country assessment, or a DECA, for our USAID missions and partners working at a country level. To date, we've conducted these DECAs in Kenya, Colombia, and Serbia, and we are just finalizing Nepal. We also have 10 other assessments planned or in various stages of development. Ultimately, we intend to develop an assessment for every one of the 100 countries where USAID operates. Through the process of conducting a number of these assessments, we have developed a framework that helps us identify opportunities and risks in a country's digital ecosystem that are useful in informing decision makers about digital programming and investments, not just for USAID, but for all of our partners. I'm excited to announce that we officially launched this framework last month, and I'm able to share with you today some of its key elements. The framework comprises of three main pillars. The first one is around digital infrastructure and adoption, where we ask, is there secure and resilient digital infrastructure that is inclusive and accessible for all? The second pillar is around digital society rights and governance, where we want to make sure that there are robust internet governance and strong policy commitment. And the third is on the broader digital economy, where we look to see ensure whether or not there are well-functioning digital service providers across institutions and if there's a capable digital workforce. In addition to these three pillars, we found that it was necessary to also consider four cross-cutting topics, that of inclusion, cybersecurity, emerging technologies, and geopolitical positioning. Of course, each country's digital ecosystem will have unique dynamics and risks, which warrant specific and targeted engagements, such as implementing more robust policies, closing gaps in the talent pool or in digital skills, and expanding opportunities into new communities through digital technologies. For example, USAID in Colombia has used their digital ecosystem country assessment both strategically and practically by incorporating digital development into their long-term plans and by adopting more current specific recommendations, such as pursuing projects that enable women entrepreneurs to harness digital tools. Our digital ecosystem framework is a step towards establishing a common understanding of digital development and will guide USAID's work moving forward. Certainly, as an agency, we have a long history of driving digital inclusion, particularly for the most underserved communities coming online for the first time. And we've specifically and historically focused on closing the gender digital divide. We're very proud of that work, but beyond those efforts, we are eager to explore with partners more holistic opportunities and approaches to fostering digital inclusion and closing all digital divides across all aspects of today's digital world. We believe the digital ecosystem framework we've developed is another component of that work. As we shift to a whole of government approach to leveraging digital technology and engaging with the digital ecosystem responsibly and ethically, it is crucial to ensure alignment amongst donors and government counterparts. To that end, we are also developing a digital ecosystem country assessment toolkit that will be publicly available in the coming months. And this toolkit provides step-by-step instructions for not just USAID or our implementing partners, but for anyone really, to independently conduct their own digital ecosystem country assessment. Together with both the digital ecosystem framework and the DECA toolkit, we hope to enable stakeholders to understand the existing ecosystem and make informed decisions regarding digital development funding. We encourage donors, multilaterals, partners, the private sector, those of you in the audience today, to really incorporate the framework and use it as a guide for your future digital interventions, as well as to foster greater coordination, to ensure project and program alignment, and to identify potential areas of mutual collaboration. And we hope that you will consider that as we move forward today and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you. We'd be very interested to learn more about your toolkits and the strategy in our discussion session. By the way, we are flooded with many questions here. We have many for Doreen. We have some for Dr. Song. I think something will come out for you, Chris, too. Yeah. Right. We'll entertain some of the questions here in our Q&A session. Now, I'd like to move into our discussion session, right? Right. And I will start off by asking some questions to our speakers to facilitate our discussion. And I will also invite the comments from other speakers as well along the line. And I did some homework, and I read your presentation, and I came up with a couple of questions for you. I will just start with Doreen. Doreen, you there? Can you hear me well?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, great. Right. We clearly understood how this advantageous to be offline during this pandemic, right? And you referred to an estimate of 430 something billion US dollars required to connected by the year 2030. And my natural question is, how are we going to secure that money? That is a question for you, Doreen.
And that's a great question. I would say, I think the money's there, but I think we have to get creative about how we leverage it. And I certainly agree with my two colleagues, the previous speakers, and in their remarks. I think maybe the short answer would be we need more collaboration. So it's great to hear the views of the previous speakers and that we're all aligned on the approaches. So I think it's about collaboration. It's about pooling resources. It's about sharing resources. I think also trying to identify seed funding to attract private participation. Of course, no one, as I mentioned before, no one single party is going to be able to finance this. We need to work together, and we really need to be creative. We have a working group in the context of the Broadband Commission for Sustainable Development. They've been looking at this issue for about 2 years now. It's been quite interesting, the process, and they're looking at recommendations in the space of, can we broaden the base of contributions? Can we reform universal service and universal access funds? We've got 100 funds out there. Many of them have not been touched. You know, what can we do to leverage what's out there and also bring in other kinds of resources? I want to mention, I mentioned GIGA in my remarks, but just to perhaps say something more there, there's been lots of calls to create an international fund of sorts. And what we've been advancing with UNICEF in the context of school connectivity is to establish a connectivity bond. This follows the example of Gavi, right, that was created for vaccines, and of course the International Finance Facility for immunization. And it's based on the idea to have private investors and government donors that can work together to have a greater and more immediate impact. Of course, then it was about global health. But we believe that we can do the same for school connectivity. And I think that COVID has proved the urgency and the need for something so different and something so big. But I'm optimistic. I think that this can work. We know that in order to attract the funding, it has to be worth the risk. And of course, when we talk about school connectivity, definitely, I think the case is clear. We know we need to be setting priorities. And here, I think the importance of political will, government commitments is also absolutely critical. And I think we need to be looking, as I said, to extend different kinds of sources of funds, and of course, pooling resources, and even looking at different models of infrastructure sharing and other kinds of sharing arrangements. So perhaps I'll stop there. But yes, I think the money's there. We just have to be creative. Thank you.
Very useful answer. And your comments remind me that in the last session, some of our speakers said food is there, but the question is how to get access to it. So similarly, you mentioned that point. I touched on that point. Thank you very much. And if there's any comments or want to supplement from other speakers, you can do that, taking this chance. Chris, you have anything to add? If not, Dr. Song, nothing? Then,
sure. Just
please.
Very
Yes.
briefly, Kyung.
Go on.
Yes, I support everything that Doreen said, but I think her point around the universal service funds is a wise one. We know that many of them are untapped. We know that many universal service funds have large pools of money, but perhaps the coordination is not in place, or that they are held within one line ministry, and other line ministries aren't able to really tap into them. And historically, there have been some narrow definitions of how universal service funds can be used, largely to extend rural connectivity and remote connectivity. But I think there's new opportunities to think across a digital ecosystem and really work at a country level to ensure that the universal service funds that are available can be used to drive greater digital inclusion and closing the digital divides that we've been speaking of today. And that's definitely something, to Doreen's point, around collaboration and partnership, where I think if we're moving forward as like-minded donor actors and other partners in digital development, that we can really gain some huge advancements by leveraging those funds and then crowding in other resources as discussed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. I'll pick up that private sector partnership part for Dr. Song. You mentioned that it's necessary to attract a private sector participation and strengthen collaboration between the private sector and aid agencies. But private sector, I'm actually from private sector, and tends to have more appetite for profit than this kind of bigger cause. So the question is, how are we going to motivate or incentivize private sector to join? That is my question for you.
Thank you, Dr. Ko, for your question. Yes, actually, it's not easy. It's not easy because in general, and typically the business sector, they try to have their kind of a profit, and the profit and revenue is the A1 kind of target of the business activities done by the enterprises. But sometimes that we can persuade them, and in my opinion, that they already recognize it, that the development cooperation, or so-called sometimes it's ODA, is kind of an investment for the future. That means that if we can make progress in terms of not just the social kind of a aspect, but also if we can support the economic development in the developing countries, it means that the business enterprises will have more and better opportunity in terms of the market. And also, at the same time, if we can support the development of human capital in the developing countries, more and better compared to this point, it means that the enterprises can have better kind of manpower around the world. So I think they already recognize it, but also at the same time we have to persuade them. We have to sometimes shout that this should be the kind of investment for the human being and so for the future. So it will beneficiary to the business enterprises ultimately. I think that should be my the comment as an economist. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Song, for your question. Two very tricky questions. Thank you very much, and I fully agree. And we have to showcase some good example to private sector to join. And Doreen or Chris, you want to add anything from your side?
I was just going to jump in. I mean, I completely agree with Dr. Song's points and the need to incentivize the investments and incentivize and motivate the private sector. And I think, Chris, you were mentioning, or in the introduction, your work in the Connected Women program of GSMA. And there's so many great examples where things have been tried, perhaps under a CSR type model, and they've actually turned out to be revenue generating. And so this comes back to Dr. Song's point. I think we need to do a better job of promoting those cases where something that did not appear as potentially revenue generating actually became revenue generating and transformed a person's life, a family's life, and a community's economic welfare. So I think there's lots of great examples. Perhaps we just need to replicate and scale those examples. Thank you.
Very good point, Doreen, very good point. Thank you very much. Now I have a question for Chris. Yeah, this is going to be very interesting. Your digital ecosystem country assessment looks very useful, and I really look forward to looking at it. And based on your toolkit that you have already been, you already conducted, such as Kenya, Colombia, and I forgot the last one. Did you find any common gaps and patterns that have emerged out of that assessment? And what action areas have been identified? Chris? It's too difficult?
Great.
Oh,
No,
no.
that sounds good. Thank you for that question, Kyung. And so we originally picked 4 countries. Yes, Colombia, Kenya, Serbia, and Nepal. And we did that because we wanted to treat the 4 as a pilot and have geographic diversity to make sure that we could really add a level of rigor and validation to the entire methodology. And so now that we have those 4 together, we can actually begin to look at the patterns and respond to that specific question. And of course, the details vary from country to country, but what we've found, and I have to give kudos to my team focused on the digital ecosystem country assessments. They are brilliant minds, but they are also very collaborative in terms of developing this framework. And what they've seen from a lot of the interviews in country is a lot of folks have been concerned about digital literacy, as we've already flagged, and cybersecurity. And I would suspect that's also true for more developed countries in addition to developing. These are things that everyone wants to see more of. When it comes to digital literacy, people in most countries seem to be more comfortable with very intuitive online tools, such as Facebook, but struggle more to understand their rights online and the risks that they actually might face, again, particularly for folks coming online for the first time. And there's always a risk that people who build inferior products will blame the lack of adoption or inadequate digital literacy on why they aren't well used. But in general, I feel like people understand that the economy of the future will require a different set of skills, will require digital skills and digital literacy. And they're anxious that they might just not have their systems in place to provide them quickly enough and to enough people. And on the cybersecurity side, it seems to me be more common for cyber organizations to exist on paper, but to be understaffed and underfunded. And I think a number of us are very late to the table in really recognizing the need to build cybersecurity into everything we do. We often hear people express concerns that governments don't see cybersecurity as a national security issue, viewing it instead as a matter of policing. And so we think that through the decades, we're hearing that and we're responding to it. And we think that cybersecurity actually connects well with digital literacy. We actually have a very broad definition of digital literacy in our digital strategy that speaks also to ensuring that people understand their rights and protections online. And I get a sense that developing country governments, some want to have the systems in place, but they need to know the starting point. And I think that's where this assessment really will help them move forward.
Thank you very much, Chris. I have some follow-up question. Is it open document, your assessment report? Public? Open to public? No.
Yes and no. It was always our intention to make sure that these assessments are available to the public because we do see them as a public good, and it does not serve us enough interest if we hold it ourselves. And so the ones that we've published to date, they end up having both an internal version and an external version. The internal one is very much inside USAID and speaks to its programs, et cetera. But the external one that is available on USAID.gov are there for everyone to absorb, to use, to build upon, and we welcome any responses or reflections on those assessments.
Very good answer. Thank you very much. And I have one more for you. Stakeholders involved in this kind of assessment is not always very responsive. And what is your assessment of overall response and engagement from stakeholders' side? Were they responsive enough? Thank you. Chris?
Yes, they were. The first one we were able to do actually in country on the ground. The other ones, of course, with current situation have been all virtual, but they've they've been dozens of interviews, up to 60 different interviews from all parts of society. And you have both early adopters of digital technology, and you have those who perhaps are a little bit later to the game, but really interested. And it's quite remarkable when you just surface the idea of understanding how all of the pieces fit together, that it allows people to kind of reach out of their own silos and their own lanes and recognize what's going on around them, and then recognize how an infrastructure really serves as an enabler for new services and new products to build upon. And so I think that's just been a takeaway as well. We get to see the totality of that when we put the assessments together. But in the individual interviews and engagements with in-country actors, they get to see part of that as well, which I think is incredibly exciting. I mean, we are in the business of fostering greater collaboration and partnership, and this is just another opportunity to do so.
Thank you very much, Chris. Any additions or comments from other speakers? Your answer was very clear, I guess. Thank you very much again. And I'd like to turn to Doreen again. The 14%, only 14% of women have access to the internet at this point. And any suggestion to ensure women are not left further behind to build back better? To Doreen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that's a great question and a very important topic as we talk about inclusive connectivity. And of course, our data tells us that it's about 86% of women in developed countries are using the internet. And there's this gap, of course, when you look at least developed countries where they could potentially benefit most, and there's only 1 out of 7 women accessing the internet. And of course, the pandemic has made the gender gap more concerning. It's a complicated issue because it's not just an access issue. Yes, there's a digital gender gap in terms of access to services and access to devices. But there's also a gap in terms of the digital skills piece, the digital literacy piece that Chris just spoke about. And women and girls are less likely to have those digital skills that even if they had the device, they had the connectivity, they may not be able to benefit from it because they don't have the digital literacy skills that are needed. The other piece, and this is also quite complicated, is that we don't have enough women in the technology sector. And so it's difficult to get young girls and women to take up studies in the STEM field, which ultimately means that the pool of women joining the tech sector is smaller. And unfortunately, we see this kind of leaky pipeline that women actually leave the tech sector soon after they join. And of course, when it comes to creating applications, if women don't participate in the creation of those applications, if women are not participating in creating the algorithms that we're developing right now, that can certainly negatively impact on societies. So what can we do? I guess that's the question. I think we need things. We have a great initiative called Equals, where we have all these partners that are focusing on the 3 spaces that I've mentioned. I think we need governments to have policies that promote inclusion. I think that's critical. We need the private sector to also step up and play a more active role. We need more role models out there, more female role models that can help dismantle stereotypes and actually show young girls what they can do if they take up a career in the tech sector. Gina Davis always said, if you can see it, you can be it. And I really believe in that. And of course, we need more partnerships and collaboration, which is something we've covered in this session. So if we can have more partners and greater collaboration, I think we'll be more successful in really scaling our reach and, of course, ultimately our impact. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Rowan. A great answer to a very, very difficult question to all of us, actually. Now I'd like to turn to Dr. Song. Yeah, you mentioned and highlighted the scaling up public-private partnership program. Do you have any good examples of the successful program that have been implemented probably in Korea and which can be also properly replicated in other countries' context if possible? Thank you.
Yes, in this case, I think I have to talk about the KOICA CTS program. The CTS program is a program targeting the startups and the small companies, small to medium companies, and also social ventures. Let them be engaged in the development cooperation at the same time in technology kind of a transfer at the same time, also do their own business, improve their own kind of business capacity in the partners countries. And actually in my slide, actually I just skipped because of the limited time, but in my PPT, I mentioned about the smart malaria kit. The small company, but very capable company, the name of Noel, has invented some kind of smart diagnosis the kit for the malaria. It means that if we have just one drop of blood, then this kit that can identify that whether this person is gotten the malaria or not, has the malaria disease or not. So it means that it will create some kind of opportunity of practicing the technology of small to medium the companies into the field. And at the same time, it can provide assistance to our partner countries. And small, but critically and substantially improve the quality of life of our partner countries. So it just started in 2015. So it just passed in 6 to 7 years. But last year and this year, I guess, the companies who participating in this program, they were not able to travel to our partner countries because of COVID-19. So maybe next year, I hope the program will be more active after the COVID-19 is over. And how we can recommend this program to other countries. Maybe in USA and Japan and other European countries, I think they have very similar kind of programs. And yes, the most important one is that we can have a very good partners in our partner countries. Means that the companies, enterprises participating in this program, if they can find out or if they can set up the companies in our partner countries, then I think this program will create a better outcome at the site. I think I can say at this moment, in this case. Thank you.
Great answer, Dr. Song. Thank you very much. Let's see. Okay. Now I'll try to entertain some of the questions here. We have lots of questions here. Many of them in Korean, many of them in English. So I will pick up the English first. Let me go for Chris. The question is like this. Within the existing ecosystem, to what extent is the role of political willpower and engagement critical to help drive and catalyze digital transformation? Did you get the question? Yes.
Great. Yes, and it's a timely question. Thank you, because at the Talent Digital Summit this week in Estonia, that topic has actually come up rather often. And of course, you have a prime minister here who is digital first, as is much of the government. But this concept of political will, I think, is a good one. You know, in for me, it comes from all places. The suggestion was made this week that it does need to come from the top. And if you do that, you certainly will have the flow down. And we see it here. We see it in countries like Rwanda, very digitally savvy, forward leaning, because you have that top level support and political will. And in doing the early digital ecosystem country assessments, it struck us the same chord. For example, in Colombia, the team met with someone who at the time was a presidential counselor for economic matters and digital transformation. And his team was located in the president's office and really had the authority and mandate to do very big digital things across all parts of the Colombian government. And we saw a similar story in our assessment of Serbia, where the prime minister is a big proponent of digital, and she has a team in her office to advance digital initiatives across the government. And the top down really does matter. We know that there are other countries that we're in the process of assessing that don't have that political will in place, perhaps, where you see a combination of outdated laws and very siloed systems, governments not talking with one another, and actually, in some cases, government information being passed around in thumb drives. But the political will, I think, does have to come from the bottom up as well. And if I may, I'd like to augment a point that Doreen made in her previous answer of making sure that we don't leave women behind. Doreen, you mentioned in your early remarks about the importance of locally relevant content. And I really think that is a critical piece to this. We know that locally relevant content in local languages, keeping local culture and tradition in mind, has this incredible opportunity to drive agency, to give voice to people who perhaps otherwise did not have it, to really offer a sense of empowerment. And one program that I really love that we do, that I really need to highlight, is that of Youth Mappers. We have a Youth Mappers program through our Geo Center that basically leverages online digital tools, in this case, OpenStreetMap, for youth on the ground to map their communities, to put their communities on the digital map, so to speak, and really start having conversations with governments, local and national, around how resources are offered to those communities based on what the maps look like. And there are now almost 300 chapters in universities in over 60 countries, a lot of them really being built organically from the ground up, where you have incredibly talented female digital ambassadors, youth mapper ambassadors, and other youth who are actually moving the decision-making of government towards what they're seeing on the ground. And so I think there's an element of political will there that comes into place too. And just to stress that it really should come from all places if we're going to be able to be most effective in driving this digital transformation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. While I have you, let me clarify one thing. In your DECA, Digital Ecosystem Country Assessment Toolkit, does it have a digital literacy assessment component in it? Chris?
You're going to have to dip deep into my brain here. Does it have I don't know for sure, but I can tell you through our digital literacy work stream that is part of our digital inclusion team, we are just finalizing a pretty substantial primer that allows implementing partners and others who want to encourage digital literacy a starting point. And so I believe that is going through internal clearance processes as well, but we hope it'll come out and sort of serve as a compendium to the DECA toolkit itself. And I should note also within our digital strategy implementation, we have a line of effort that is focused exclusively on digital literacy, not just programming around digital literacy, but to say any program that we do across sectors that has a digital component needs to also build digital literacy into it so that we can drive these digital skills and we can leverage what we know is needed to close the gender digital divide and other digital divides. I hope that helps in answering the question.
Thank you, Chris. Because I asked that question because I have related question for Doreen about digital literacy. That's why I wanted to clarify with you, Chris. Thank you. Doreen, I have one question for you here. It's about digital literacy. Okay. Digital literacy is inherent to digital transformation. And as we know, ITU published a digital skill assessment guidebook last year. And as many international organizations are engaged in this area, and perhaps a unified platform incorporating all related agencies might be necessary to bring more efficiency. Could you share, and maybe we can offer this platform to USAID as well. Could you share your thoughts and ideas on this issue, Doreen? I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you. Also a great question. And of course, the suggestion to have a sort of open, unified platform is something that we fully support. And it's actually, in some ways, the rationale behind what we did with UNDP. I mentioned that before, that we kind of combined our offerings in an attempt to help countries on the ground, help the UN resident coordinators on the ground to be able to match what we have with what's being demanded. So we have our own programs. We work with different governments, we work with different companies, and we're certainly open to working with other partners. I do think that we need to come together. So collaborating in this space would be great, and having a sort of open source type platform, I think would be terrific. We've seen lots of great examples where if you train people on the ground and then they can go out and train others, things can scale up pretty quickly, and I think that's what we're looking to achieve here.
Thank you very much, Doreen. Actually, our center is closely cooperating with the ITU office in Bangkok and in Geneva.
Yeah, and we're grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Now, I have 11 likes on this question, and this is for Dr. Song-Yu, for you. I think I came up with this question also, but proper measurement of the effectiveness of the digital technology and the digital transformation is always a big challenge and often prone to failure. Any suggestions on how we can foster an enabling environment or institutional system for proper measurement? It's quite a difficult question, looks like. And Dr. Song, can you just try to answer? Share some idea.
It's quite difficult question, actually. In my opinion, the measurement is very critical factor when we do some kind of project or program, because we need to evaluate and we need to analyze it in order to improve those kind of project and the program. But in case of development cooperation, at the same time in case of research and development, R&D, there are lots of factors, lots of ingredients that we cannot quantify it. A lot of qualitative aspects over there. For example, if I went to the Tanzania 10 years ago, and if I taught them that how to use those kind of digital devices, how to program it to the 100 kind of young people there, but 10 years later, only 5 men, they showed up as very successful in terms of a digital kind of things. They set up some kind of a startups and they scaled up and very good kind of a digital grew. And the remaining 95 just disappeared. Then if we can say that this is failure or not, 5% of success ratio, I'm not so sure. if remaining 95 just enjoying their own ordinary life, but some of them just they became a teacher and they teach some kind of mathematics and the importance of a digital kind of things in the school, and other kinds just to enjoy the mobile games at the couch, the convenient spot of the couch. Then how we describe it, how we measure it. Actually, measurement is a necessary one, but it's not kind of a almighty kind of the methodology we have to utilize it. But still, as OECD, DOC, and COICA, they are trying to establish the credible kind of indicator. It is because they want to measure it. In my opinion, that we have to be more rooted, more specific. We have to have more specific information about the individual kind of project and the happened in the individual site. So sometimes the magic bullet is very convenient, but sometimes very diversified and very different kind of measurement we have to use it. So the system or some kind of institutionalization, those kind of words are very fancy, but sometimes it's not working in the real world. So there is no magic bullet and no universal solution at this moment. So the government and the COICA, the agency, and also the actors in the field, we have to get together frequently and regularly. We have to change it, transform every kind of a measurement and periodically and regularly. I think that's the only thing I have to say at this moment. I'm an economist. I strongly believe the data, but I do not give the total credibility to the data because data is just the data. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Song. M&E measurement and evaluation is always a big challenge to everyone in every project. Thank you very much. And before I wrap up, do you have any final remarks, Doreen or Chris or Dr. Song, if you want to make within 1 minute or two? Do you have anything? No? Is it no or yes?
I just make perhaps a brief comment, if I may. I
Sure.
just wanted to come back to the point, of course, about measurement, because measurement is absolutely key. And if we can't measure it, it's hard to actually move, of course, the needle. And just to mention that we've been doing some interesting work in the context of the UNSG's Digital Cooperation Roadmap, trying to look at what it means to be connected, what it means to be meaningfully connected. And coming back to Dr. Song's points, which I agree with, part of the challenge is defining what those other pieces mean. We've always been focused on the infrastructure piece and the subscriber piece, but we were never focused on the usage piece and the literacy piece. And so these are things that we're sort of grappling with now to try to come up with universal definitions of what we're all talking about. I just wanted to stress the importance of that. And thank you.
That's a great point. Thank you very much. I fully agree. I will now close the session number 3. For the speakers, thank you very much for your wonderful conversation and very insightful comments. Thank you so much. And for the audience, thank you very much for your active participation. You flooded questions for us. And for the organizer, thank you very much for putting all the efforts together to make this event a very successful one. And thank you very much, and good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. Have a wonderful
Thank you.
evening.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank
Thank
you
you
very
very much, Doreen.
Thank you.
On behalf of everyone, I would like to thank Mr. Ko and speakers of session 3. Also, I would like to thank our audience who have stayed with us until the very end. Before we end today's conference, I would like to invite Mr. Song Min-hyun Vice President of KOICA for Development Strategy and Partnership, for his closing remarks.
네, 안녕하십니까.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us till this very late hour, online and offline. I hope you have enjoyed today as much as I did. Including developing countries, all countries need to be safe from COVID-19 pandemic for everybody to be truly safe and free from COVID-19. As we have found out through today's conference, the pandemic, climate change, digital divide issues are complicated challenges that no single country can tackle alone. They are truly global challenges. And that is why development cooperation needs to play a very important role. In the first session, Building a More Resilient Health System session, Director General Cho Young-moo, Director Myra Neira of WHO, Director Chunti Mai Oain of Vietnamese Health Strategy and Policy Institute have spoken about the importance of building a healthcare system that is environment-friendly and resilient. In the second session about green recovery, we've heard from Secretary General Frank Reitz-Berman of GGGI. He has proposed the green growth strategy for each developing country group, and Deputy Executive Director Joyce Eung-suya of UNEP, she has shared various green recovery success cases of many countries, and we have become much hopeful after hearing these presentations. In the third session, Director Doreen Bogdan-Martin of ITU, Deputy Director Chris Burns of USAID, have made a presentation that emphasizes the importance of achieving digital transformation that is inclusive so that it can accommodate the needs of marginalized and vulnerable people. There is a poet in Korea, and she said that birds build their nest on the strongest windy day, because when the nest is built in strong wind, it will not go down in strong wind, but a nest that is built on a windless day will go down at even the slightest wind. This is a difficult time indeed. However, if we can pool our wisdom and efforts together, I'm sure that we'll be able to build a nest that will last even in the strongest wind in the future. We need to create a resilient, environment-friendly, inclusive future for everyone. As Chairperson Susanna Moorhead of OECD DAC has mentioned in her keynote presentation, Korea is emblematic of hope and recovery. Over the past 70 years, in the ashes of the Korean War, we have achieved spectacular economic growth. Vice President Song Eun-kyop of KOICA and Vice President Song Chi-wook of STEPI have emphasized that Korea's Green New Deal ODA and Digital New Deal ODA will serve as a new milestone for all of our efforts. KOICA, that celebrates the 30th anniversary, will also be an active partner in this journey. Once again, I would like to thank all the speakers and everyone in the audience for joining us till the very end, and hope to see you next year. And we would like to now conclude the 14th Seoul ODA International Conference. Thank you very much.
Now announce that the 14th Seoul ODA International Conference is officially concluded. On behalf of Ministry of Foreign Affairs and KOICA, I would like to thank each and every one of you, especially online audience who have stayed with us the whole time, for all of your support and participation. Thank you.